This is my lunch for today, and James is having some pumpernickel bread. I'll talk about that. It's a gluten-free recipe, and I use that omega-3 oil, and he'll be having a pear, which we'll talk about that later. He'll be reviewing Naked Lunch and The Ugly Russian, and the recipe came from here, but I changed it a little bit. So let's see. So this is what I do with my books. When I alter the recipe, I put how I altered it. And so this is the recipe on page 36. And I thought it was pretty good. And what I'll put is whatever James, if he says, yeah, it tastes great, then I'll put that there. But I've tweaked the recipe because I didn't want to put the starch. And instead of the pea flour and bean flour, I put chickpea flour because I can buy that for cheap and it's easy for me to find. So, and I toast that first because I've found that it ends up, it doesn't taste as good if I don't toast it first when I use it in recipes. And I also put buckwheat flour, which, anyway, it doesn't matter. I didn't want to put so much starch, like this has a lot of starch in it, and that's a lot of the time with gluten-free bread recipes, that's what they're using as starch, and basically it reacts in your body like sugar, so that's not something that I want to be feeding James, is a whole lot of starch. I did use 1 tablespoon of cornstarch because I had it around, but I used a cup of apple flour, which I made myself from my apple trees and dried out anyway, I've talked about that in the past. And I used a little bit of the brown sugar, not as much as they'd used, but just so that my yeast would rise. Yeah, pretty much. Anyway, I'll talk about the recipe as a little bit, maybe more. So, anyway, so what I use, they have vegetable oil in here. I didn't do that. What I did is I used this omega-3 oil, and I don't think it's a very good brand or anything, but I bought it for next to nothing because when Shoppers Drug Marts, when their things are about like have say 2 months or something or whatever of before they expire or something like that, they put them on for very cheap. So I buy a lot of our supplements that way, so I would have paid probably a quarter of what the regular price was. So that's what I do. And there are certainly brands that I would prefer to feed James, but this works out fine. Wow, that's cheeky.
Yeah, it is.
For including in recipes. So there's other ones that I've talked about that are encapsulated and they seem better. They seem to be better brands. But anyway, I really like this recipe book. Even though, I mean, you can see I changed the recipe quite a lot. And, oh, I forgot to bring xanthan gum out. So, I'll show you that the next time I make a recipe from this book. Somebody had given me xanthan gum, and I'm glad for that because I was having a tough time getting gluten-free recipes to stick together, and now I know how to make it work using xanthan gum.
I was able to make that work because this bread without it would crumble, and I found it was good in soups and things like that.
Well, that's right. I was still using the stuff when.
But it's not what people traditionally think of.
So he was having croutons basically in his soup when it came
out. Well, only actually healthy and worth the effort, really. Croutons got to be close to the emptiest calories out there, right?
Yeah. But anyway, I did find a better way to hold bread together, and it looks like bread when you use psyllium fiber and molasses. So, and I haven't found anybody else has tried that for bread recipes, so you can try it. That's my own invention, I guess, is using psyllium fiber.
And you're not asking $1 million from everyone who uses it, you know.
And I'm not publishing books and every year and
saying the same thing over and over again, only in a different format. Talk about planned obsolescence. It's absolutely
free for you to watch us talking about things. So, the next loaf I'm going to try is cranberry wild rice loaf on page 90. It sounds awesome.
You were mentioning the wild rice. You hadn't mentioned the cranberry. It's going to be kind of like a bog recipe.
Yes, well, they use dried cranberries in this. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use the cranberry flour, which I made. So this one's the apple flour, and I've found that I can make a lot of interesting things using pulp, like juice pulp, and turning that into flour. And why not? Anyway.
Are you afraid of things?
I am.
Okay.
But that doesn't matter. I'll just move my. There we go.
Okay.
Now I won't worry about it.
Oh, you're afraid of that.
Well, I don't know. I'm kind of picky about things.
Okay.
But James is going to talk about
the books previously mentioned. So, Naked Lunch, the second time I've gone through it. It actually improved with reading. I'm a whole lot more mature reader now. When I say mature, I just mean I know a lot more. So, stuff that I struggled over now, I'm going, oh, okay, that comes out of the Quran and stuff like that. This is where that is and stuff. It's amazing how much more I can concentrate. I think I don't know how much of it I read basically since yesterday evening. I think about more than half of it. Just boom. So what was a tough read, just going, reading a page at a time, something like that. When I was in my 20s, it's gone pretty fast. Went pretty fast. I could read it like in 1 day easily. It's not that long. So is it worth it? It's funny how they did the movie and they left out all the political. Did you get any sense that there was politically incorrect stuff in there about people of color, use of the N-word? So they were saying they were trying to adapt it to screen. I think to a certain extent they're trying to adapt it to modern day sensibilities. Like a lot of people would see it as being Orientalist because it was written in Tangier or finished up in 1959. It's a long time ago. And he keeps talking about Eastern this and Eastern that, and people are way too sensitive about that. I've got to say, if you think you're being your culture is stereotype, think of what it's like to be an American now. I mean, talk about stereotyping. Everyone white at least is supposed to be like Donald Trump, and guess what? It just ain't that way. So there are some people who support Trump because they fear the left wing, and this is where we come. The ugly Russian. Wow, that's politically incorrect. It's lucky they didn't say the ugly commie or something like that, because that would include the red Chinese, and oh my heavens, that would be, you wouldn't want Theresa Tam to find out about that, because that would be bigoted. Okay? When you're a commie, that's a choice. Okay? Doesn't matter what color you are. And it's open season, not on your life or on your health, but on your beliefs. You got that? It's open season on your beliefs. In other words, they shouldn't be censored, but hey, we get to laugh at you. and we get to sneer and jeer and fleer at you. Okay? Because despite many you faux lefties' efforts, it's still a relatively free country. Okay? So this silliness is that, we've seen recently in the faux left movement. We're here. This was published 65, paperback 66, a cloth 65. 66 is a long time ago. It's almost 50 years ago. And, you got the Russians accusing the Chinese of racism, and the Chinese accusing the Russians of racism, and both of them accusing the Americans of racism. Okay. It's hilarious to read the accounts, hilarious, in a very sad way, the accounts of exchange students in Russia and in China from back then. And I don't think it's improved, although what person would want to go to Russia as an exchange student to get quality education? Maybe in computer science, maybe in mathematics. They're talking about these are people from Africa, talking about people calling them monkeys and making fun of their blubbery lips, or that's not my description. That's the description is given by the poor objects of the racism. Similar thing in China. I knew about this stuff in China. I knew a guy who's a person of color from the South Asia who was a communist as well, and he was laughing in a not a very pleasant manner about how racist, and that was his term, the Chinese were. Again, I've got to make it clear to you faux lefties who always want to come across as the worst interpretation of things. When I say Chinese, I mean the People's Republic of China. Got that? I'm going to say it every time, but unfortunately, I'm afraid you haven't got that. But there's no excuse for you not getting that now. Okay? Now, is this naked lunch worth it? Don't pay money for it. It's not nearly what Rolling Stone magazine writers and readers and stuff like that thought it was. But I was amazed when I read Kentucky Ham, and I'd forgotten a third William S. Burroughs thing I read. It's way better than those. Those things were so. I figure he wrote those after it become kind of like eviscerated by various forms of drug addiction. I guess Burroughs was addicted to alcohol and heroin, and maybe some other things. I think he tried out methamphetamines. This is certainly enough of a reference in the book to maybe give you that idea. Incidentally, for you flunkies out there who like more than a sip of beer, Burroughs had this interesting take on things, as I recall. He'd been an alcoholic by his own account and a junkie, and he said it was tougher to get off alcohol than it was to get off heroin. That's a harrowing kind of revelation. Might have just been him, But alcohol's a serious drug. It's actually kind of like a witch's brew of drugs. It's got acetaldehyde in it. Also found interesting enough in cigarettes. So there's a variety of different things. It's not just one pure type of alcohol. Now the Ugly Russian is a wonderful read. Although it should have been called The Plug Ugly Russian, because it would be an answer to a book that I'm sure was out by then called The Ugly American. And this is talking about how the Russians and the Chinese were rushing around trying to curry favor with people like Fidel. They should call him Infidel Castro, or Infidelity Castro, because his belief system and its practices will be much closer to the Maoists. In other words, you have the peasants laying siege to the cities and stuff like that. That's Maoist formulation, not mine. Okay, you can find. I encourage you to go out and find the quotes. Okay, and it was a similar thing with Castro. They hang out in the Sierra Maestra mountains in the southern part of Cuba, and then they come blazing out of there to take over Havana and the other big cities. They never took over Guantanamo. Maybe that's where Raul and Fidel and a few of these others belong. Why do I call them infidel or infidelity? I don't want anyone to get confused with infidel and any religion out there that might use that term, including the Christian religion. Basically, that means unfaithful, if I'm not mistaken. And so, how was he unfaithful? He was closer to the red Chinese, red commies. And understand, I have no compunction about using the word commie. And that applies to Marxists. Nazi is a term of a kind of dismissive abuse, and so is commie. Commies are barely any better than Nazis. Yes, I said that. Yes, unfortunately, it's true. In terms of how the overall effects. Understand, Nazis think that they're improving the world. So do commies. And it's like, the Bible. Should I quote the Bible? I'll be quoting a little bit of it. Like I've got something about rock music. This is early 80s when it's put out. Published in Beaver Lodge, Alberta.
Oh, that's funny.
And it's an American guy. You know what I'm saying? Beaver Lodge, Alberta. Beaver Lodge, my heavens. This is the second time you've looked really, really bad. The other time was when a bunch of bozo, I hope they were teenagers, went and laid kind of like siege to people I think might live in BC. Not very nice people from what I can tell.
I thought they live near Beaver Lodge.
Okay, they were near Beaver Lodge, but they might have actually gone across the border. Beaver Lodge is not that far away from the border. Okay? And they were doing donuts on these people's lawns. And one of them got shot. Not saying that person, or any of them, frankly, deserved that. But, they deserve jail terms for that kind of intimidation. It's almost like terror tactics.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it is.
it was
terrorism.
It might well be. It's stuff based on ideology. I don't know if these people were Christians. Hopefully not. They're definitely not behaving in a Christ-like fashion. But at any rate, this is a hilarious read. If you can get it used, I would have got it for 25 cents half price at MCC, and it was well worth that. But it's probably well out of print, and it's definitely not worth picking up as a collector's collector's item where you're paying a huge fortune for it. But it is very revealing, and so many of the buzz phrases being used by the Chinese and by the, I should say, People's Republic of China. You got that clear? And the I don't like using Soviets because the Russians, the commie. Well, I don't even like using the term commie. What can I call them? Anyway, Marxist Stalinists. They're using Stalin-Leninists. Okay, because I got my problems with Marx, but Lenin was incredible. Do I have to say anything about Lenin or Stalin? I probably do with some of you flunky Antifa idiots, or Antifa, however you pronounce your name. Just leave the anti off. You guys are FAs, okay? You fascists. It's just you are Rousseau-esque fascists. In other words, what we're looking at is when we're looking at Nazism versus and anarchism versus or Nazism versus Leninist Stalinism or anarchism is you're seeing two movements that came out of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the noble savage, and stuff like that. Savage is maybe not, it's probably sauvage or something like that. It's not my term, okay? I don't like thinking of people in those sorts of terms, even Nazis, I suppose. But maybe Jean-Jacques Rousseau is an ignoble savage. He would understand he's not living in some forest somewhere, which is where savage comes from. Selvage would be it. Like he actually knew how to put a few words together and stuff like that. But he came up with this idea that it's basically very conservative.
Did you see the titmouse?
I know I did. Very conservative. Both the communist movement and the Nazi and fascist movements were and are deeply conservative. Deeply conservative. So you get Marx criticizing the socialists before him, calling them utopian socialists. And it is a problem because they want to get back to that Rousseau-esque Garden of Eden. But so does Marx. So does Engels. They're talking about primitive socialism. Well, that's just the Garden of Eden. Okay? So, and it's no accident that both Engels came from the Judeo-Christian tradition. Engels would have come from the Christian side, Marx from the Judaic side. It's hard to give up on that idea of getting back to the garden. We've got to get back to the garden, as Woodstock's lyrics, thanks to Joni Mitchell, has it. Like it's just, like, again, I don't want to say that capitalism is a forward sort of thing.
Well, no, because
but
in the end, capitalism just leads to everything being monetized, right? Having some sort of monetary value. So anything that is freely available competes with industry. So clean water, which is accessible through streams or rain or whatever, is a threat to capitalism, right? So they need to be controlled and taken away from people so that people have to buy clean water from someone selling.
Mm-hmm.
So
eventually be that way with there.
yes,
The main problem
everything.
I got with capitalism is it's corporatist. It's corporations, after all. That might be the logic of equivocation. I don't think so.
So do they leave the bones in those?
No.
They take them
Or
out.
if they are, they kind of get cooked or something like that.
They look like they're in there.
Okay, they kind of get cooked or something like that. Okay. Anyway, I am against corporatism. Now, that's been used to describe fascism and or Nazism, but corporatism is very definitely there in communism, anarchism. There are other reasons why anarchism is a problem. Huge problem.
So how's the bread?
Insurmountable. It's pretty good.
Okay, so it's worth eating again?
Well, we'll see.
Or do I have to tweak the recipe?
We'll see.
Okay. It is a little unusual. Like, you could see when I had the camera on it, it doesn't look quite normal like bread, but it's sliced really easily, and it is attractive. It's just not just like bread. So, yeah.
So, any major religious system, corporatist. Capitalism, corporatist. Nazism, corporatist. Communism, corporatist. And sad to say, socialism, where the socialism, social democracy, with the socialism trumps, and I use that word advisedly, trumps the democracy, and it's almost every form of social democracy that's ever existed. then it's corporatist too. I'm sad to say. You got to have democracy to break down these various corporatist type of entities. Believe me, that wasn't an exhaustive listing, but there you go. Democracy is how you break that down. Not a perfect panacea or anything like that, but it's a step in the right direction. So, by all means, get hold of the Ugly Russian and get informed about how stupid, how full left-wingers have been parroting these lines. Are not new. They're not new at all. They've got the PRC and the so-called Soviets throwing them at each other and throwing them at the Americans. And when they're throwing them at the Americans, it's thoroughgoing hypocrisy. When they're throwing it at each other, it's a hypocrisy of a different kind. Enough said.
Oh, and I bought these pears from Superstore for 24 cents a pound. I've never seen prices like that.
Well, worth it, eh?
And
Even
they're
though they're
delicious,
pears.
even though I don't like pears. But for pears, I found them to be quite nice. And I've already had mine for today, so I ate some of my apples off the tree sliced up with my meal, but James hasn't had his pear yet today. So,
Not yet.
because we have a lot of pears to get through. Because for 24 cents a pound, I was like, well, if we're not getting through them, I'll just make pear chutney or something like that.
That sounds
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So it doesn't really matter if it looks like we're not getting through them, then we'll get through them. Just maybe not right away. Maybe once they're canned. But I'd prefer to get through them when they're fresh. But anyway, anything else to talk about? Anything you heard on the CBC that was interesting, or?
I'm sure
I mean,
I
we
heard
were
something
talking
stupid.
about the price of aluminum. Apparently Trump is putting tariffs or something like that.
Or raising them.
Yeah, on aluminum from Canada,
Yep.
and people seem concerned about that. But honestly, I was hearing about how aluminum cans are hard to come by, and the price of aluminum cans has gone up. And it's like, well, I expect that what Canada's doing is exporting raw aluminum to America and then buying cans back from the United States at a premium. So maybe this is a good time for Canada to start actually manufacturing their own things like aluminum cans and say disposable masks for pandemic time, stuff like that, so that we don't have to go, oh no, pandemic, what are we going to do? Even though we have like a million trees here and all these resources, but somehow, like you said, Canada should be the wealthiest country in the world.
Per capita.
I mean, we
Not
have
even
so
close.
many resources here in Canada that
And
we're
such a-
basically just
relatively
giving
such a
away to
small
people and then
population.
paying a premium to get them back. It's ridiculous. And yeah, I mean, you go to the hardware store to buy lumber and it's absolute garbage. And you know that you could go out to just not very far out to the woods and get your own lumber and whatever. But you can't. We're not allowed to as Canadians. We're not allowed to go out to. But
Gotta save
but
those forests
somehow
for
big companies
American
are
companies.
allowed to pay almost nothing for the trees and then sell it back to us at a premium and only give us the crap stuff. It's really quite interesting how things don't work in Canada.